Hi, my name is Valerie Taylor, and I'm a registered nurse. I want to talk to you today about caregiver burden. I have a tape or a clip from an interview that I did with my mother-in-law, who was the caregiver of my father-in-law before he passed away. She had been caring for him about 4 years. Was diagnosed with vascular dementia. He had other comorbidities like congestive heart failure as well as diabetes, and he was insulin dependent. As a result of that, she experienced a lot of burden, stress, and it was very difficult for her at times to deal with the situation, feeling very hopeless and helpless. Caregiver burden is real. It causes illnesses for the caregiver. The caregiver needs help, and oftentimes we are not able to identify that because we're really not looking for it. So as you're watching this interview, please take these things into consideration when you are dealing with your patients as well as even your loved ones, that caregiver burden is real. We want to be able to keep them at home by identifying the burden and giving them resources and the help that they need so that they'll stay in the race, so that the system will not become inundated with all of these people that need care on our system, on our healthcare system. And it is going to be a problem with this silver tsunami that's coming, or that not only is coming, it's here already. So watch with me. As a caregiver, what are some things that have been helpful for you? Because we know that the stress and the burden is really high on caregivers because it's a 24/7 job. And so what are some things that have been helpful for you to care for yourself, not necessarily care for them? Because I know that you have done a wonderful job taking care of your husband.
Well, you have to pray. You have to pray for strength. I know that. And going to church was helpful. Being around people is helpful. Sometimes even when the grandkids would come over, they could entertain Charlie and Charlie could entertain them, and they loved him. And it takes his mind off of himself, and it gave me a chance to do other things, get on the computer, stuff like that, while they played little games with him. When we used to play cards or dominoes, when you and Charlie were coming over and we would play games and all, that was helpful. As long as he was busy doing something, I think it helped me. Sometimes I would get some of these movies that he liked or videos that he liked and put them on. He could really get into them. But after a while, that didn't even work, So when he was going to the adult daycare, that was very helpful. He enjoyed it. He felt like he was at a job, like he was working, but he enjoyed going there, and just got to a point where he was requiring more attention than they could give him because he couldn't do anything for himself after a while. But initially, that was a big help. Gave me a couple of days where he would be going. And even when he had physical therapy, I would go with him and I would sit there for an hour while he had physical therapy. But he enjoyed interacting with people. He enjoyed the physical therapy. So those kind of things were very helpful.
It was difficult for you to send him into respite, and you had promised that you didn't want to do that again. So what do you think, how could you have been supported in that time, even though it was really difficult with taking care of him and things like that. What do you think, what other kind of support do you think that you could have been given and not having to send him out? Was there anything that could have been done?
I don't know, because he really didn't want anyone else there. Me or Charlie, and sometimes Stephen, my other son. But, you know, when people come from home health care, he really didn't want them there. So it was a necessity that I leave for a little bit, but I just didn't feel like I could do it again because I was away, but I was worried about him the whole time, and they told me every day, every morning, he was disoriented and he was saying, get my wife on the phone, call her, tell her to come get me. And that, I couldn't enjoy myself. So when I come back, and I was so anxious to see him, to see if he was okay, and he says, don't do that again. And I said, I won't leave him again. But that's just my case. I think people do need that respite care. They do need a break. I felt good in a way. You know, I felt like I really needed a break, and I was ready to keep on with him and do everything I had to do again when I came back. In the hospital, in the rehab, and sometimes at home, I would make sure I made him eat by feeding him. And he could probably have done it himself because he would do it around people if I wasn't there. But I would do it.
Now, why, in your mind, when you think about it, what was your rationale for doing that?
Well, because he was diabetic, and I wanted to make sure he ate. And one time I went to the hospital, and they said he didn't eat much breakfast. And I said, well, was anybody helping him? And they said no. So I said, okay, I'll be here to make sure. And so I would spoon feed him. Because he would just let it sit there, you know. And when I fed him, he ate every bit of his lunch or dinner. So to me, it was an easy thing to do, but I think you could have been lazy. Because he told me sometimes, I know, I'm so used to you doing it. But I think if they can feed themselves, let them. That was just doing too much.
Yeah, but you know that that kind of helped him remember also, because I would really probably say that he's probably not being quote unquote lazy, but that was a kind of a reminder to him that we really have to eat. Say if you are, just like when you and Pop used to eat dinner together, he'd watch you eat, and so that would encourage him to eat. But oftentimes in the hospital or the rehab, he was eating alone, so there was no prompting. So, you know, that you probably did the right thing, because yes, even though he could, that prompting would have reminded him, you know, to eat. So
yeah.
So, you know, some of the behaviors that were kind of difficult. It would take forever for him to get his bath, or going on sitting on the toilet.
It was nerve-wracking because he would sit in there and he was, I gotta take a shower, And I said, I was afraid for him to get in the shower if Charlie wasn't there to help him. And I begged him, let me just wash you. Sit on the tub and I'll wash you from head to toe. And he would eventually let me go ahead and wash him. But if Charlie was there, then he could give him a shower. He was insistent on getting that shower every day. And he couldn't find the handle to the shower. He couldn't find his toothbrush. He couldn't find his toothpaste. It just was getting steadily worse, and I didn't know. I just didn't know how much he was going to decline, you know. And I prayed that he wouldn't get to a point where he couldn't swallow. I prayed about that, and God did not let him get to that point.
And he was also able to continue to do his own insulin and take his medications.
Yes. I would give him the medication, and almost to the very end, he could give himself the insulin, but then he would give it to himself in the stomach. I would give it to him on the finger. I would take the blood, and then he would do it in his stomach. I insisted on it. I didn't want to stick him in his stomach, so he would do it.
But that was helpful for him as well, because it allowed him to continue to participate, be an active participant in his health care.
Yeah.
And so that was really very good. You know, that was great.
Yeah. And what the doctors all said was every time he came to the doctors, they would say, "Well, how are you doing?" "I'm fine." He never complained. They didn't know he was as sick as he was because he would always say, "I'm fine." You know, he just never complained. He was amazing. I would take my Bath and Body Works stuff and have the candles, and I would have a glass of wine or half a glass, and sometimes I would read my book. I do love to read. These are relaxing things, and it's necessary to have something to do by yourself that you enjoy. And then I would watch funny stuff because I didn't want to watch anything serious. So I would watch The Golden Girls and Frasier at night, get a few laughs, which is very important to have something to laugh about. Sometimes Charlie would even watch it with me if he was awake, but that was all part of the relaxation.
You know, I found, and just changing the subject a little bit, there was so much love that I saw between you and Pop. It was just so tender. And even though sometimes it was the repetition or having to redirect him that sometimes just really was frustrating at times, there was still that bond. There was that relationship that your 50 million kisses.
I know,
and
because
you laughed.
he didn't want to. I would say to him, "Are you depressed, hon?" And he said, "No, I got a good wife." And he knew that he was so loved. You know, he knew that. And I could feel the love from him when he saw me. He'd brighten up. Of course, he'd brighten up when he see you too. But I always felt loved, and I always loved him so much. So when you love somebody, when you care, you will do just about anything for them. It's heartbreaking, but you'll do it.
Today, enjoy yourself.